Good evening, everybody. I'm very happy to see you all here with Eyal Weizman. I'm going to make this short introduction in French, but you'll see the rest of the presentation will take place in English. Eyal is perfectly fluent in French, so the questions you have at the end of the presentation can easily be done in French. Anyway, we'll see.
Terme de la présentation pourra se faire dans les deux langues, donc on verra un peu comment on s'organise, ce sera informel et familial. Donc
Eyal is the founder and director of an interdisciplinary research laboratory called Forensic Architecture, which I will leave to Eyal to translate into French, but for the moment we'll leave it in English. And he works at Goldsmiths College of the University of London. It's an institute he created in 2011, and he'll talk about it a bit later. He is Israeli, but lives and works in Great Britain. Eyal is a trained architect, and he's been working since the early 2000s on the violence committed by Israel in the occupied Palestinian Territories. In particular, Ben Celeb, in the wake of considerable human rights violations on the planning and architecture of the colonies on the West Bank. He has written several books, which I recommend for your reading, a few of which I'm familiar with, in particular, a very good one called Civilian Occupation. It's a catalogue of iconographic exhibitions dealing with the architecture of colonization. It's one of the books by Eyal available in French. And then there's this one, called The Least of All Possible Evils. It is more broadly ambitious because it's an attempt to provide information about least harm and the less glorious aspects of humanitarian pragmatism. It's this aspect that interests us the most here in the whole body of his work. In 2014, he brought out a book that details in a fairly precise way the forensic architecture process. Once again, the title is in English and is called Forensis, the Architecture of Public Truth. It's a collection of contributions by people who participate in brainstorming in the field we will talk about a bit later. So why have we invited Eyal? We at Crash have had a few opportunities to meet with him both formally and informally, and all of these occasions have been the opportunity for us to reinforce our fascination with this process. And we thought it would be very interesting to share it with you. Our fascination stems from his completely renewed look at the violence of war, particularly that committed by states. Also, we'll look at the convergence between political, military, and humanitarian interests, something which we at MSF are pretty familiar with. Eyal will give you a more detailed account of what I'm talking about a bit later, but he does it by working with pictures on the supposition that pictures leave footprints. These pictures, in the large sense, are photos, films, sounds, maps, pictures of the ground, topography, buildings destroyed, which inform us about crimes and the responsibility of the criminals. And so why have we invited him precisely today? Well, first of all, we are benefiting from Eyal's presence in Paris. Tomorrow he's going to give a lecture at Rubble, an exhibition hall center near Paris's Place de Clichy, where his works will be shown.
on est dans le domaine de la
It's called La Preuve par Image,
que l'opération
which I would also urge you to go and see. And then, and this is more of a coincidence, the Operation Protective Edge unleashed by the Israeli army against the Gaza Strip started about a year ago, more or less,
et que MSF a marqué aussi
and about which this year MSF is highlighting its 15 years of presence in Naplouse.
finalement c'est un bon moment pour nous aussi de
So in the end, it's a chance for us to discuss in a kind of offbeat way the politics of violence in the Palestinian territories.
dans les territoires palestiniens. Voilà, bon, alors comme
So, since all introductions to lectures are the better for being shorter, I'll stop here.
ce que j'ai
What I've suggested to Eyal is to talk to us about his work in the Palestinian territories in particular.
on pourra revenir après sur un ensemble
Afterwards, we can come back in a more general way to his whole body of work. But it will also be a moment for Eyal to talk about the forensic architecture process, what it means, and what it hopes to achieve, and perhaps to introduce other colleagues with whom he works.
et puis de présenter éventuellement d'autres collègues avec lesquels il travaille. Voilà, merci beaucoup Eyal.
So thank you very much, Eyal, for coming, and we'll come back to you all afterwards for a question and answer session.
Merci, Michel. Thank you all for coming. I'm absolutely delighted to speak here. It almost goes without saying how influential MSF and Crush has been on my thinking. I'm going to speak to you about forensic architecture. Very briefly, it's an association of architects, artists, and filmmakers that look at architecture as a field of study and attempt for the presentation of the research to have political effect, let's say. We'll go in much more detail and through the examples, and I'll return again and again to it and try to unpack some of our principles, but to start with that. A group that attempt to to understand that there is something very specific about architecture that can allow us to understand aspects of violence that perhaps other disciplines cannot. And it is exactly in that intersection between space and violence that we are entering. I'm starting with this particular image because somehow for me it was a formative image. It's part of a map that I've produced in 2002 as a part of a human rights report. I was then just a graduate architect. I entered into the B'Tselem office and I was asked to help in producing a kind of a strange human rights report, one that would associate the work of architects and planners in human rights violations and violation of international humanitarian law. In fact, you would say that it's obvious because any practitioner that aids or abets an illegal occupation, and we're speaking about the 1967 occupation of Palestine, would bear some responsibility. But this report tried to take it one step further. It tried to claim that there is something, that there is a formal aspect to it, that there are some violations that exist and are performed on the drawing boards of architect. And for this, we needed to assemble a new tool, and that was this map that would look very carefully at the formal specificities of settlement design. So not only that people are being housed in occupied areas in contravention of the Fourth Geneva Convention, etc., but the way it was designed. So I'm not going to speak about it very much, but just to say that that image, out of which I've abstracted anything else, the place names, the roads, scale, anything, is embodying something that kind of haunted me since, and that is a certain relation between force and form. What you see here in this map, in the spectrum of blue, in the darkest blue is the built-up fabric of the Israeli colonies in the West Bank. In the spectrum of lighter blues is the areas under their jurisdiction and areas into which they would expand, while in the spectrum of brown you would see built Palestinian fabric in areas under their jurisdiction. But what you see is an incredible formal complexity. And in order to understand politics in the West Bank, what you'd need to do is to press play on this map. And then you would see how form and the kind of the architecture of the occupation operates as an elastic medium that continuously translates micro and geopolitical forces into form, right? So the idea was to turn a kind of a historical, journalistic understanding of the occupation into a formal one. And what does it mean? It means to look at that image as an archaeologist would look at a bit of ruin or a bit of reality from which you would reconstruct from material specificity or formal specificity the forces that have produced it. Because if you would say the form of settlements, the border of Palestinian areas are a result of micro and macro political forces, there's a constant transformation in there. You would also understand that you can read politics by looking at form. Form is a certain index, and the entire report of about 200 pages that went with that map was an attempt to read every twist and turn of that shape backwards to political forces. This is, for me, was very interesting in that it established a kind of a relation of elasticity in the occupation. And somehow what came out of it is also a critique of the way in which we understand traditionally the relationship between architecture and power. Architecture being that which is static, which is like a fortress or panopticon, a permanent thing that processes people, towards an imagination that is much more liquid and gelatine, in which, in fact, the power of the occupation operates through its continuous transformation rather than through the permanence of anything in there. And I was showing in the report that goes with it how, in fact, it is not only the checkpoints, but the fact that the checkpoint location always changes. It is not it is the transformation and sometimes even a retreat. Some of those blue points that you see here no longer exist. Others have increased. In some area, Palestinian areas under Palestinian jurisdiction have increased here and there. That area is a kind of a viscous, vibrant space that continuously translates politics into form. And then people would say to me, but hold on, how come the wall, which we know is the most direct embodiment, the absolute kind of diagram par excellence of a static thing, how does that qualify under a theory of elastic space? And I think that in a short, very short sketch that I would show you right now, I will introduce the way in which the wall actually, the power of the wall, really operates through its transformation. So in the idea of everybody, and especially of in the European imagination, the wall is a part of a geopolitical border that simply separates one side from the other side. First of all, there is no one side and other side. There's Israelis on all sides of that. And second, the wall is not yet even complete. And even the bits that are complete are sometimes transforming. And I'm actually very much tuned into the way in which that seismograph of the wall continuously changes as a kind of indication, as a kind of a very tuned seismograph also of Israeli politics. So let's see how it is done. I mean, for example, what you see here very simply is one of a very classic example where Israeli outpost being built somewhere during the process of building the wall, this is 2002, forces the wall to swallow it in like it was a tongue of a frog or something like that. No, it's kind of like it stretches out to do it. So there is a relation between points and lines in this area. But primarily the medium, the place where the elasticity of the wall is manifesting itself in its clearest form is in the High Court of Justice in Jerusalem. This is the kind of paper that Israel would stamp on olive trees. There was a kind of paper stapler, no? they would staple it on olive trees when they want to take away your land. And they would say that in the area between those two lines, for a temporary period that is unspecified, for that temporary period, they would take that area for a temporary security measure. So, Palestinians have access since the late 70s to the Israeli High Court of Justice. There's a lot of discussion and debate and dilemmas on whether to go to the Israeli court or not. That group of Palestinian villagers has gone from Bet Surik, next to Jerusalem, has gone to court. This is a typical scene. Oh, actually, the slide here is not clear. It's sort of washed. But imagine the slide over here shows you a kind of a plan of the wall. And what you see is that inside the wall, this is a second before the judges come in. You can still take pictures. So they're setting up. You see the human rights people setting up their data projector. This is Muhammad Dahle, who's representing the Palestinian. This is an Israeli officer, arranging his own expose, like little exhibition about terrorism and why it is important to have that. And they're going to fight it out in court. The army would say, we need the wall very deep in, and the human rights would say, no, we need it a little bit more out, and they would bargain and etc. But what is very important that this negotiation happens in court and through architecture, on architectural representation. So the judges are looking at those images and they're saying to the parties, we actually don't understand anything of that. You're talking to me about a slope, a valley, a hill, a wall, high, low. And in architecture, an architecture professor that has a student that speaks too much, you say to them all the time, go home and come back with a model. And this is what the judge said. So the human rights group, they said, we are only human rights people, we don't know how to build a model. But they had 10 days to build it, so they had to rush, and they went into a company that makes model for the army. And they said, can you build us a model for the wall, of the wall? And he said, but we don't know where the wall is, etc. Finally, they negotiate. Money changes hands. Hands are being shaken. And a model arrives in the office of Muhammad Dahle in Jerusalem. This is the model of the wall. In fact, the first model of the wall is being designed by people that want to destroy the wall, not by people that want to build it, which is a kind of a strange thing. Usually, architects that want to build something build a model of the wall. But you see on the wall, on the model here, there's various lines, and we need to look very carefully at this line. So first of all, there's the green line, which is the green line, of course, separate the area occupied in 48 and 67. This is internationally recognized as Israel. This is the West Bank. This is a settlement, right? This bit over here. In red is the area where the military wants to build a wall and somehow started to build it. And in blue, the human rights group, after a lot of negotiating, smoking a lot of cigarette and debating it amongst themselves, decided to draw what was later called the best of all possible walls. The best of all possible walls is not as bad as the army wall, and it's a little bit, you see, it is in the West Bank, but it's leaving some more fields in the hands of the Palestinians. Although Muhammad Dahle made a little trick, and you can see that over here he asked the wall, the lesser evil wall, if you like, to cross into Israel, go along two valleys and a hill, and go back to Palestine, as if saying, you can never actually build that wall. No, the only legal reason for the wall, for the blue wall, is to take the ground away from the red wall, to show that another wall is possible, in paraphrasing another kind of slogan of the left. So anyway, 10 days later, the models are called in, and now I cannot take pictures in there, so there's two porters, and they're carrying the model into the room. It's the first time that the model has been shown in the Israeli court, and nobody knows where to put it. They go round and round in circle, and nobody has an idea until somebody says, let's call out a table from the cafeteria. Somebody runs to the cafeteria, come back with a table, but it's a low table, it's a kind of couch cafeteria. and they put it under the justice bench. Now, the problem is that the judges are sitting high and the model is too low. And they cannot quite see what is going on. You see they're sitting on this bench, etc. In Israel, we say judges have no, they don't wear trousers. You never see their leg. So for the first time ever, they all step from one side and the other side and go and stand inside the arena around the model. So all of a sudden, the legal process is transformed from legal language into architectural language, and all protocol is taken out of the window. There's no longer your honor and my learned friend, and all those things are being thrown out, and they start fighting it out on the model itself. Everybody is enjoying it. Even the human rights people have been officers in the army, of course. So everybody is like looking and correcting. And if you read this book, you have the protocol of that, which is hilarious because the human rights people are advising the army how to maintain its security by the lesser evil wall. And at some point they agree to combine it on one particular point. This is our very famous Justice Barak, one of the most brilliant legal minds, checking a particular controversial twist and turn in the wall. And finally, they managed to push it about 400 meters in some areas, 50 meters in the other. They did save some fields, but they entered into the kind of humanitarian paradox that you know so well here, and we can discuss later. In fact, it was a very strange kind of process of participatory planning. I don't know if you have it here in Paris. It's very common in London when you invite the people to advise on how the bank that is put on their park is going to look like and how many floors it's going to be. And here it's just a kind of a process like that by which the victims are invited politely to participate in design of their own prison, and somehow works. No, so the kind of liberal occupation, if you like, adapts all this kind of instrument of democracy, and the wall is being produced, and one of my greatest friends and somehow somebody I admire a lot, Michaël Sfard in Israel, he said to me, you know what, at some point I feel I become the architect of the wall. I want to make another, so this is really just a short story that Michaël really wanted me to talk about. It's got nothing to do with the lecture today, but I want to make one note, and that there is a sequel to that story. And with Michaël Sfard, forensic architecture was invited to another moments of another law case that you know very, very well in Batir. I will not going to speak a lot about it, but it's the wall snaked all the way to that ancient village that has terraces going back to the Roman and biblical, whatever that is, period. And another debate started. And in fact, in a kind of an internal discussion amongst people, we decided not anymore to appeal for human rights cause. It's lost for human rights. All you get is a kind of, you can bargain on the kilometer, no? I mean, how much human right for how much security, you know, how to balance. Proportionality is a kind of a material practice, no? Because proportionality is an engineer. It's like the form of the wall is a diagram of proportionality between how effective the human rights people say we need to save some things and how aggressive the military claims in making their security consideration work. So how do you measure the security of an Israeli soldier driving along a jeep, taking a left turn in relation to how many kilos of olives? Or there is a kind of strange economy that of equivalence that need to be formed, but in fact it's formed. In that case, very, very briefly, Sfard and we were working with him on this case, decided not to appeal for human rights, not to ask for proportionality, in fact to ask to run a case simply on quote unquote the right of the environment, using the fact that that was a kind of a historical area that had natural beauty and historical significance, created a kind of a strange coalition of Palestinian villagers and some settlers even that did not want the wall, and got a verdict that there could be no wall in this area. The claim is for no wall whatsoever. When that was won, the claim that was put on top of that is what is the difference between that, an area of a great historical value, that sounds like a whole Palestine, and if you can live without a wall there, why don't you live? So it's a kind of, it was a way to kind of question the very politics of partition. Forensics is really the category that dictates the work of forensic architecture. And by saying forensics, we mean to return to the Roman meaning of the term, to the Latin meaning of the term forensics. When Cicero or Quintilian mention the word forensics, they do not necessarily mean the legal domain. They mean things that belong to the rather anarchic space of the forum. Forensics comes from forum, the space of economy, space of politics, space of circulation, law, etc. And forensics was the art of the forum. It was a way of making political claims through things, right? The kind of the rhetorical form was called prosopopeia. This is the kind of the animation of the inanimate, right? It's a kind of a rather speech through material things that was done there. So we think it's very important to return to that, because otherwise forensics becomes a very technical and legalistic practice that does not think politically and does not think of itself as a kind of as a rather general form of political intervention. As we know, forensics has been telescoped since the time of the since its inception. The meaning of the word slowly became more and more specialized until right now it is the application of science in legal settings. So that's what it is, and it's highly regulated. There's a protocol. You have to accept the rule of evidence of those things. And of course, if forensics is the act of the police, the act of the state, there will always emerge counter-forensic practices, attempts to evade, to erase, to escape identification, to operate outside of the juridical framework and the frameworks of that are very regulated in the domain of human rights, etc. So we tend to think of our kind of agency as doing two things. One is opening up forensics as a political practice, and two, inverting the forensic gaze. This is not an act of state against citizens, but a kind of a citizen act that is directed at the state itself. I'm going to show you three projects that we've done in the recent years, just in the recent 1 year, in the recent 12 months, because maybe you know the older work, and also to show the range. I choose to show three works that operate to a scale. The first one is about the body. It's about a homicide. The second one is about patterns of violation across space, because there is a limit that you can arrive with a criminal framework. And the third one is about environmental violence, slow violence of large-scale and historical transformations. Also, those three cases that I will show, each one performs in a different forum. This one is a case, the first case that I will show you is a case that actually has been performed in the Israeli court system, in the Israeli criminal system. It's a case in which we do not want to enter as expert witness in court. What we've done, and I will show you how, is to snipe at it from the outside. Whenever something has developed, we would put online another bit of evidence and kind of try to intervene in the legal process without entering it, without being part of it. The second case is a human rights report. It's a report we produced for Amnesty International on one day in August last year, on the 1st of August 2014, in Gaza. It's one cycle of the sun, if you like, a tragedy of one cycle of the sun, 8 o'clock till 8 o'clock in the morning, August 1st. And the last case is the case of Bedouin displacement in the Israeli Negev, and that case has been performed in a forum that is very different. It's a truth commission, a self-organized truth commission by a group of anti-colonial feminist group in Palestine. The Gaza work is also preparing itself for petitions in the Hague. So you have a kind of a range of fora, if you like, and each one, of course, is skewed and problematic and difficult in a different way. I mean, all the institutions we work with, whether they are universities or galleries or museums, they're all conditioned in a particular way, and we are trying to move our work between one and the other. And we also, as a matter of principle, and whenever we can, say to the people that we work with, and we work for a lot of prosecutors, that we would never surrender our evidence only to one form. Would always, our understanding of forensics is that we will move the evidence from, a kind of an exhibition, let's say, to truth commission, to a legal case, etc. So it performs in multiple scales. In Naqba Day 2014, there was an incident that actually started the escalation that led to the Gaza war. It was Naqba Day's 15th of May. It is, of course, Naqba Day is something that is unaccepted in Israel. There's a law, the Naqba law in Israel. You're not allowed to commemorate it. You would lose your funding if you do. And of course, because of this institutional negation of the Naqba, Palestinians are congregating on both sides of the Green Line to protest it. And usually during that day, there's also a lot of cameras. So what has been created during that day has been created because the situation that evolved because there was so much media. This is Nadim Nawara walking after the demonstration, simply walking along a shop and seen in a CCTV camera of that shop falling. He died. He was buried like almost all Palestinian youth in the West Bank about 4 to 6 hours after death is declared, right? So no, you don't let the dead stay overnight. 400 Palestinian youth have disappeared in that way, living out of the house, shot, killed, declared dead. The funeral is immediately done. There is no evidence. They simply disappear. In that case, in particular, one of the rare cases, there was some evidence. Of course, the IDF released a declaration, the preliminary IDF is the Israeli army, inquiry indicates that no live fire was shot at all on Thursday during the riots in Bitunia. This is a town next between Ramallah and the wall. And we have to determine what caused the result. Maybe what caused the result. Maybe the Palestinian shot himself, or maybe that guy committed suicide. We are looking at, we were in fact modeling the scene, and I will show you, getting the pathological report of where that person, Nadim Nawara, was shot. And the first thing that has emerged is a bullet. In fact, there was a bullet in the backpack of that kid. So the bullet is kind of, the whole investigation started around that bit of material reality. A bullet, and what's a bullet? So the Israeli expert is explaining here, this is a kind of a police expert on ballistics, who explains, first explaining a report to the IDF, and then later in TV, this is Channel 2, like one of the biggest, most popular TV channels in Israel, that a bullet like that, the front part of this bullet would have to be crammed if this bullet has passed the body or a human body, right? So the bullet would have just, the tip would not be so sharp. And he's very sure of himself and kind of rather arrogantly says, anyone that understands anything about bullets knows that this bullet did not do it. Okay, boom. So we had to, here we were now commissioned by the parents of these kids and by Defense Children International. This is an NGO that asked us to see what you can get beyond the kind of pathological report that confirmed there was a bullet wound, how we could engage with that situation. So again, we were modeling that environment. And as it was Naqba Day, there was also news media, mainstream news media. Here in this case, CNN channel. CNN journalists were on site filming the soldiers. Just taking, you can do it if you're a CNN journalist. You cannot do it if you're Palestinian TV, as you will see later. And the Naqba is the Palestinian catastrophe. Naqba Day, 15th of May, that is the day of the establishment of the State of Israel, is marked by Palestinians as the day in which the Palestinian catastrophe began. Of course, the Naqba is not only 48. The Naqba is a continuous practice of slow violence that operate to this day. So it's not a commemoration of something in the past. It's a commemoration of the beginning of a certain condition of displacement, etc. Sorry, I mean, but do things like that, because I need to rush through a lot of material, and I will not clarify those things, and you would do well to ask what is not. So anyway, the CNN is filming a group of soldiers,
At the precise moment when Nawara was shot, CNN's camera
and then they
was
hear
rolling,
something.
filming an Israeli soldier
The
shooting his
CNN
rifle at the
crew.
Palestinians. And then
So this is the film, and they pan across, and they see a group of Palestinians dragging the body of Nadim Nawara. So the first thing, this is a very simple process that we had to do, but that's the beginning of establishment of what happens. This is an investigation was undertaken at the Center for Research Architecture. The coordinator was Nick Axel. It has Stefan Kremer and others involved in it. The idea was to sync them, to find a frame in both videos that describe the same time. There's 25 frames a second in a video, and it's quite, it takes time to find the same frame. What we're doing here is to look at the person with the white shirt, if you see, marked here in red, and he's turning his direction of running twice, and that allows us to determine the frame. Then we rewind both cameras at the same time to look what happens at the moment that he's falling, and you see him falling, and here in the sound diagram you would see a kind of a sharp sound, but he's coming from behind that bush, and at the moment when this soldier has been shooting, then the time is going on, and then another soldier is seen shooting at the scene. What we need to do also is to, it's a kind of very classic pathological, ballistic process, is to model it in 3D and to see whether a line of fire existed. Again, what we are, so you have that 3D model. Now, 3D models are incredibly important instruments for constructing a form of vision for us. So one of the principles of forensic architecture is that you look at the wall and at destroyed buildings, at physical evidence, architectural evidence. And another is the way that you use architectural models as optical devices in order to see images. Very rarely you have a situation like in Blow Up, where you have one image that all the clues are there and you can zoom in and find things, or a kind of a photojournalistic shot that captures everything. What we're encountering more and more is what we call the image complex. The image complex is a relation between evidence and image of various sources, and an architecture is somehow used as the kind of the optical device to arrange that relation between images. The story does not exist in that picture of him falling, or in that photograph of somebody shooting, but in putting them together. Here it's a very kind of simple process. So models are operating in those two ways. So here we are returning to the Israeli very good ballistic expert from before, who is marking out, of course, the wrong soldier, and he's saying, you see that gun, and you can look at this gun, has something on the barrel. And that something on the barrel is something that we know, and it's true, it is a steel-coated rubber bullet extension. So the Israeli soldiers are basically shooting steel bullet covered with some rubber at the Palestinian youth that are demonstrating. They have killed numerous times people, they've taken eyes out, etc. In fact, rubber bullet is the very embodiment of the idea of the lesser evil, if you like, in your term. And he says what you see here is that soldier, of course, the wrong soldier, was not shooting with live ammunition, but rubber bullets. So you have no case. Says this is only for rubber bullets. Now, I don't show you, but also the other soldier that we have identified, the right soldier that shot, also had that. Now, what is happening in the West Bank, because there is absolutely no accountability at all, Israeli soldiers, and we did research, we looked at blogs, at soldiers' blogs, they put, when you shoot a rubber bullet, in fact, let me show you the next video. It's a kind of a technical explanation of guns. So bear with me, it might be a little bit uninteresting, but it's important. So we had to do weapon analysis and understand the principle of how munition behave. So first of all, we see this is the soldier that shot, and we see he also has a rubber bullet extension on the gun, right? Now, we are asking ourselves, can live munition be fired through a rubber bullet extension? The Israeli army said no. The guy said no. The most basic thing that you do, you go to the brochure. It's a commercial product. So we just go online, and it takes 5 minutes, and it says immediate 550 lethal firing capacity without removing the adapter. So that was not difficult. But so we know that he could have shot, but did he shot? Did he shoot? So this is now the next part of the analysis. Did he shoot it? Now, so now you need to bear with me. When you shoot live munition, you shoot it through a barrel. What happened is that the cartridge takes gas, the head of the bullet comes out, and then there is enough gas inside the barrel to push out the cartridge, right? And that is what is creating automatic fire. You shoot one bullet, it takes back your mechanism, and you can shoot immediately again. So now we are going to see. This is how it works. This is an M16. This is what they were using there. Now, this is how a steel-coated rubber bullet works. So what we've done is, with a lot of Palestinian collaborators, we've collected an archive of shootings. There's a lot of images around, also on social media, of Israeli soldiers shooting. So we take that and we analyze what do we see in the guns that shoot. So first of all, you see that this guy has the extension, and he's shooting. And now you'd see he has to cock the gun. He has to cock the gun because when you shoot rubber bullet, what you shoot through it, there is not enough gas in the system to take the whole mechanism of the gun backwards. So what he has to do after each time you shoot, you need to cock it manually. Then you put the ammunition in the top. And then he can shoot again. So this is how it looks in section. You take a blank. This is the rubber-coated munition. The gas would travel through the barrel, push that rubber-coated bit out, and there will be not enough gas in the system to remove that, and in fact you need to cock it manually. So here, let's see this soldier shooting. This is a Palestinian network. We know this rubber coated. This is how they're marked with red. And you see he's doing, and you see the cartridge flying out, right? Now, let's see what happened with our guy. So, okay, do you see, look carefully, there's one pixel there. You need to see it again. Do you see it flying out when he's shooting? That is the cartridge flying out of his gun. That means that he's shooting live ammunition rather than rubber bullet. But it's not only meaning that. It's meaning, of course, that he did the killing, but he also tried to hide the fact of killing. So there's two acts of negations are double violence. It's a violence against people and things, and it's a violence against the evidence that violence at all has taken place. A negation is part of violence. And this is the practice of denial, negation, in that case, and you see it very clearly. Look at it again. Now he's cocking the gun, but when he's cocking the gun, you would see. Okay, so now we see the cartridge flying out, and then you see him cocking the gun, and then you see. Now look carefully. Hop, you see the bullet came out. He does it to show to the camera that he shot rubber bullet, but he got rid of another bullet in his magazine. Now, what happened here? Those Israeli soldiers have in their magazine 10 blanks, 1 live, 10 blanks, 1 live. They're counting as they're shooting steel-coated rubber bullet. Then they want to kill. They shoot a live ammunition through the rubber bullet extension, kill that person, cock the gun, show as if they've done it. And it's against all that evidence that we had to actually interfere. So soldier was initially arrested, released, we published one study. There was another bit of process, we put it online. Those things went viral in a kind of Palestine, our small epidemiological system. Now, there was another child that died during that day. That Muhammad Abu Daher was also killed at the same spot. However, by the time that Muhammad Abu Daher was killed, CNN crew already went home. In fact, CNN crew did not even know that they have the footage of the killer in their archive at all. In the meantime, Palestine TV arrived, and as I told you, Palestine TV would not aim their camera at Israeli soldiers. So this is the following situation emerged. Also, the parents of Muhammad Abu Daher are a bit more conservative. They buried immediately, did not allow autopsy to occur.
At the precise moment when Nawara was shot, CNN
okay, so this is the... now what we're doing here is we sourced an enormous amount of photographs of that event, and in one of them we were very surprised to see this photograph is now synced to the two that I've shown you before. This is a still image, and you see this photographer standing in the frame. This is the photographer in the CCTV camera, and he's not shown on the CNN one. Now, so we know this is not anymore this is the second shot. This is not the lethal shot. And we're zooming into this image, and we are able to see at one location within the image a flying cartridge. Okay, so this is you will not see live munition flying, but this is a steel-coated rubber bullet. What we have here is a verification that the second sound that we have recorded is the sound of a rubber bullet, and the first is of live bullet shot through a rubber bullet extension. Each one would sound differently. Now, the only thing, why is that becoming important? Because the only thing that we have on Muhammad Abu Daher's killing is a sound signature. We do not have it, but we have a hinge to translate vision to sound, and we know now what sound from that camera, from that perspective, rubber bullet and how a live bullet would sound like. So we take first of all, this is the lethal shot, and this is the rubber bullet that we identified, and we take in fact one of an artist that worked with us, Lawrence Abu Hamdan, is a sound artist. He takes this is a software that you do DJ with. It's a kind of, for nightclubs, you have a kind of a sound signature of sound. This is what we had. And he basically gave a diagram of what the sound looks like in this location. So you see the lethal shot is high on the higher frequencies and stronger in the lower frequencies. And this is the rubber bullet one. So you can see very distinct differences between those So what we do next is that we ask everybody that was there to send us images and videos. And we start listening to dozens of shots. Okay, I'll try to lean towards the... Okay, this is the Palestinian TV one. As you see, this is what was recorded of Muhammad Daher's killing. And so there is no soldier shooting or anything like that. And now we are sampling all those other clips. And confirming that the second shot that was fired, not only did it come, is it another shot of live munition through rubber bullet extension, but it came from the same place, etc. We do later another analysis that is showing that the rubber bullet extension operate like a silencer. I'll have to move forward. Again, this kind of evidence is something that we produce gradually and release gradually, and we did not want to interfere and enter directly into the legal process in Israel. In fact, the soldier is now arrested and facing trial by, the military prosecutor is now it was the Minister of Defense that was quoted to say, "Oh, I know all those tricks with cameras, you cannot believe cameras, etc., etc., etc." Now, he's showing off. Now, when Israel is under pressure for Gaza, he says, "Well, you see, we've arrested that guy that shot in Bitunia," right? So sometimes one has to understand that operating on individual cases in that, of course, is a politically problematic thing. I would not necessarily say this is all wrong, because we are attempting to connect that killing to 400 Palestinian other youth that was shot and killed in the West Bank around this time. Now it's kind of like the poster case of the Israelis to say that we can be trusted in investigating ourselves in Gaza, after trying to make fun of us at the beginning. So let's move to Gaza. In Gaza, again, I will show it very, very briefly. One of the ideas of one of the problem of doing individual cases is that the system would always tend to say these are aberration of standard operating procedures. Political activists would always say, no, that is simply an example of patterns. To get something from an individual case to a political level, what you need to show are patterns and repetition. What you need to show is systematic violations. When you show systematic violation, it's no longer the individual soldier, it is the command, and it is also the political system that becomes involved. So we're working, again, we're working on all those scales. We're working, we've produced, I actually haven't brought it with me to show you, but tune in on July the 8th, we would release a platform that shows a tool that we have developed to show patterns and repetitions of violation, to show that this kind of violation are systemic, and in ways to actually harvest information, both statistical and historical, through seeing violation repetition of patterns through time. And now the next case that I will show you, I see that I'm quite behind on time, so I will not speak about it in as much detail as I would want to, but still I would say that we started an investigation that is, as I said, on the one hand it's for Amnesty, on the other hand it was submitted to the UN Commission that published last week its finding on Gaza. And it's already, we're starting to work in evidentiary level towards possible eventual ICC work. You need to understand that although the ICC is nothing that is a kind of a political Kantian ideal in our mind of absolute justice, It is part of civil society actions in Palestine. In fact, now that the unity government in Palestine has crashed, the one thing that both Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Fatah, and DFLP and PFLP can agree upon is it was the kind of joining of the Rome Statute, the joining of the ICC, and a kind of a joint project of collection of evidence towards it. I don't think that people think it's going to be very easy. In many of the meetings that we have with lawyers, we start realizing that what we need more is a good defense rather than only kind of collecting evidence for violations, because the other side is pretty good in law and will enjoy also their own kind of legal strategy there. It's going to be a field of conflict. But we need to understand if one engage in juridical process always as part of political ones, not instead of them, in a sense that the question to be asked is what does it open up in terms of other civil society action? How does it give support to action like the BDS or other non-armed, if you like, in this case, this is where it would support civil society actions in relation to Palestine. So politics operate through, usually through various things. It's not like you kind of surrender yourself into court and that goes instead of other things. But you need to think about a legal strategy that is simply part of a larger political one. Now, one thing that is very distinct in this war, in a 2014 war, that we haven't seen in a 2008-2009 Qas-led attack, which is the last time that Israel went on the ground in Gaza and destroyed and killed, more or less in the same pattern of violence, is that this time most of the material that was available to us came from social media. Palestinians were continuously recording in Gaza at the time. Also, a lot of what you see in mainstream media is stuff that the news channel bought from social media because people were going and trying to sell it to the news channels. We were asked to analyze this one day in the war. This is August 1st, because it is somehow at the center of a possible legal controversy around this war. Very briefly around this day, it started pretty well, optimistically. At 8 o'clock there was a 72 hours humanitarian ceasefire announced. Actually, I don't know if humanitarian ceasefire in this crowd is something positive or not, but at least it was supposed to be the end of the conflict. At some point in the morning, the Israelis actually, during that time, has used the time to search for tunnels and to move around in this area. And they've come across a group of Hamas fighters. So the Hamas fighters were static, probably without radio. The Israeli soldiers were getting near their hideout, which was at the top of a tunnel. There was a firefight. Two bodies of two Israeli soldiers and one Hamas fighter were found on site, and a third Israeli officer is disappeared. In fact, that was the nightmare scenario for Israel. Israel went into the Gaza war, went not to the Gaza war, but to the stage of the ground invasion in order to destroy the tunnels, some of them going under the international border into Israel proper. And they knew that if they lose one of their soldiers, that's the kind of a strategic defeat, because as you remember with Gilad Shalit, also a French citizen, was exchanged for 1,027 Palestinian and Lebanese prisoners at the time. So the nightmare scenario happens. One of the soldiers disappeared into the ground and enter into a network of tunnel, because that's happened in Rafah, the southernmost city in the Gaza Strip. And somehow the city which is in the desert part of Gaza, Gaza top end is above the threshold of the desert there. It is the most conducive earth for tunneling. The water level there is lowest. It's the border to Egypt. There is many tunnels that were used to supply Gaza with provisions that were developed since the 80s, really, since after the kind of the agreement with peace agreement with Egypt, and so it's a kind of a network of tunnels. It's taken down in there. There is in the Israeli command book a very controversial command called the Hannibal Directive. There's various versions about what does it mean, the Hannibal Directive. But in short, it is the kind of thing that tries to counter the Israeli society sensibility or sensitivity to prisoner exchange demands, and that is the release of prisoners. And at some point the military was saying, rather than allowing our soldier to fall prisoner, we would effectively, and now here it becomes a bit blurry, the official command is written, you're allowed to risk the life of the soldier, but the way soldiers are briefed about it is better a dead soldier than a captive soldier, right? So that command enters into a kind of an economy of prisoner exchange and tries to curtail that possibility, so that it will not be so. And of course, it also involves massive fire that is partly kind of punishing fire to create deterrence. All the kind of calculus of war, you know, like proportionality is one way to calculate war, no? How many civilians per military, what is called legitimate military target? How do you calculate those things? How many prisoners for one prisoner? So, you know, there's a lot of kind of calculus that go into that command. It became very controversial and very important to unpack what was going on during that day, step by step, and somehow the most controversial and I think effective decision on behalf of our Palestinian partners, and that is that to claim for the human rights of the Israeli soldier is in fact a right thing to do, right? So that person has been part of the killing machine that went into Gaza, destroyed and killed. The minute he's captive, he's under the Third Geneva Convention of Prisoners of War, he's their guest. At that moment, everything changes. The Hamas tries to protect the soldier, Israel tries to hunt him. A kind of a manhunt begins throughout Gaza, whose contours we need to understand, and what we have is those tons and tons of social media sources that we need to sync up. Now, it's the last time it's going to happen, I promise you, but in this war, it's, as I say, it's the first war in which social media was there. All the metadata was fucked. First of all, even professional journalists did not set up their camera properly to say to the GPS and the time. The social media lost the metadata when uploaded. It was a nightmare to go and get some of it back. So we have tons of things. We know it's in Rafah. We roughly know it's from that day, but we don't know where and when each photograph is. So most of our work and most of what you're going to see now is an attempt to sync up that day, which is to say, out of those hundreds of sources, what happened first, second, third, and where it happened. This is what I referred to before is the image complex, that relation between images. Of course, sometimes you have something very important. You have a tweet, you have an image, we have a metadata on that image. It says 10:52:31. So whenever we will see again that smoke plume, we would know that time in whatever picture because we have the metadata correct on it. In fact, most of what we have, and think about images you see from the Middle East, they're classic landscape shots, half earth, half sky, right? The earth is what is interesting, there's the event, and there's sky, and they're connected by smoke plumes. So you see them continuously there. It took us 4 months to realize that what we need to look at is not the ground, but the sky part of the image. The ground part of the image did not really contain what we were looking for. What we were looking for was physical clocks, analog clocks. In the absence of digital time, what we need is physical clocks. What is physical clock? A piece of shadow. If I see a piece of shadow, I can put a model and find that. And we've built an entire model of Rafah or the south of the Gaza Strip on the computer simply to act as a sundial in order to match the shadow of those images when we can. But you see, in these kind of images, you cannot do that. So what we were doing, after 4 months, I have to tell you that story. Maybe it will not be interesting for you, but just in case you think that art history is of completely no use to anyone whatsoever, I'm at Goldsmiths, I'm an academic, and I heard a lecture about an art historian called John Ruskin, maybe you know him, 19th century art historian, who was completely, like many British, English maybe, kind of in love with clouds. And Ruskin claimed basically his theory is like that, the sky part of the image and the earth part of the image have different historicity. So when the earth part of the image, after Renaissance, becomes measured and perspectival, the sky became still representational. Was still representational. It was the mood, it was divinity, it was all sort of other thing, but a kind of an accurate representation of what we're seeing. And much slower did the sky catch the earth in terms of representation. And then when it does that, with Turner, the sky devours the earth and abstract painting began. Never mind. But in fact, he had the system of systematizing cloud perspective. And then we realized actually what we need to look at is the clouds over Gaza. So the August clouds. Now there's no clouds in August except if they are bomb clouds. And bomb clouds are the kind of things that last for 12 minutes. But a bomb cloud goes through 5 stages in its development, and it never repeats itself. So a cloud is, for us, metadata. As you would see, we turn the cloud into metadata. We'll try now to sync all the war by the sky, and then look at the earth, what is happening at that time. So these are the kind of the stages of the cloud. Now, we were talking to some fluid dynamic specialists in that respect, and they explained to us something that is very interesting. That in fact it's coming from an analysis. Here is based on an article by Susan Shupley on 9/11. So in ground zero, this is a chart of what the dust that they found there is contained with. So. Fibers and asbestos and ceiling tiles, and here is in what percentage of the total it is, all the way till medication, what's the percentage of Prozac in it, what's the percentage of dead bodies in that. So the cloud, the dust of a bomb is in fact, what this that you're looking at is mainly concrete, is less so plaster, there are bits of furniture, there's bit of liquid from human bodies, the bits of body parts, bones. There are glass, and it kind of becomes this one single thing from the blast. It rises with the heat in a column. It arrives at a moment where the pressure and temperature evens out. It opens into a mushroom. So a mushroom is like, imagine you have like a glass ceiling and you put smoke into that, it just goes to the side. Then it kind of collapses upon itself, it starts raining down the dust over a large area, and then it dissipates like a candle, right? So these are, and all that happens in about 12 minutes. So we can actually look at those and kind of try to cross-reference and triangulate those clouds. So for example, we have these clouds, these smoke plumes. And this is a smoke plume. This is a footage from what is called ambulance. Ambulances were going with smartphone on the front. And after a while, you start recognizing this is, it's your screen is burned. If you see it on mine, you see more the form. Sorry, I think. But anyway, you see the same plume on 2 images. So you know this is the same time. And you can calculate the angle difference, and you can start working out and start comparing, syncing, etc. So now I'll show you. So we take, for example, one photographer who is sitting on the 8th floor of the Masri Tower, next to, for anyone that knows, next to the border. And he takes images of those plumes. And you see that the metadata says 1:45. So all this metadata is incorrect. This is a video produced by Christina Varvia for us. What we do is that we sync up. We know that the time is not correct, but we know that the difference in time between the images is. So we map now the sequence of images and look at the cloud transformations. Okay, until we see that very distinct close by plume over here, that becomes very important for us, and you would see in a second why. So this is the kind of the sequence from the Masri Tower. And also in this conflict, it's the first one that had high-resolution satellite available off. And the reason is that most image satellites are American satellites, like GOI, for example. And the US has an agreement with Israel. It's the Remote Sensing Act 1998, that over Israel, the resolution will not be 0.5 meter pixel. 0.5 meter pixel is like the size of a person is the size of a pixel, but 2.5 meter a pixel. So i.e. the size of a house is the size of the pixel. i.e. you cannot do monitoring from satellites over Israel in a way that you do Darfur, or I don't know what you use for. Only that at the last month of 2011, in the beginning of 2012, a French satellite, Pleiades, started, which you know I think very well, they do not qualify by the Remote Sensing Act of the American Congress. So for the first time we have high resolution satellite of Gaza. So, and this is a shot by pure chance. 2 hours into the conflict, the satellite goes over Rafah and takes this image. That is no longer a kind of a before and after, it actually captures the battle itself. So, of course, the satellite has a very precise metadata, and we see it to be at 11:39 a.m. Now, it became very important for us is to find, you saw that there was a smoke plume on the satellite image. So we're trying to find the same plume. In architecture, you call it plan and elevation. What we see from above, what you see from the side. Okay, so we try to identify that. So we find out that this, at the moment that the satellite went over, this the photographer actually took a photograph of this smoke plume just about to rise up. We corroborate it, we do that, and now effectively what we can do is to sync up the entire sequence, so we can now correct the metadata on this one camera. Of course, we had to do it to dozens and dozens of cameras there, and we have the Rosetta Stone. Okay, so this is effectively what you saw there, what you see here. Yeah, you see, so now we know each smoke plume, what time it was taken, and now every time that we would see on any social media, on any image, that cloud, we can sync it up. Right, so we just, in the meantime, we're only looking at the sky, right? And then we would look, after we sync it up, we look up what happens on the ground during that time. And then we basically locate those on the map, and we sequence that in there, and we'll show you later what we find out with it. So now we will see how we actually take the cloud as not only as a this is another way of finding time. Here you see that this is actually a picture taken by Hamas. This is their channel, and a second before shutting the camera, that person zoomed out and gave us 2 shadow lines over here, and now you would see that we can create a kind of a sundial. We find the location. I'm really just kind of moving forward. We correct the parallax distortion on the lens, and we build a model that will find it could simulate for us like a sundial the exact time. You see the clock on the right-hand side and the shadow until we match the shadow, and we have the exact time of the bomb. Here we do it. We corroborate everything that we do in two ways. So this is now kind of a two-point Renaissance perspective system. We need to adjust 1 degree of the camera. We build the perspective. Again, this is a film done by Christina Varvia. And you see, we build the, you can hardly see. Okay, but so we have time on the cloud. Now I'll show you why. Because if we say the cloud are metadata, they need to give us both time and space. So the minute that we sync up more than one, and we're looking for the same cloud again. So here we have something that looks like the same cloud. That we need to again establish this and corroborate it. We're looking at exactly the same smoke plume. We find the perspectives. And we calculate the form of the, it's really a shame you don't see. So we sync the first and the second, and then we can sync the third one. And we have them synced, but that allows us now to do the following thing. When we have them synced, we measure how big they are in each one of the images. So this is how to locate them. Do you see the light blue lines over there? So at the point of intersection of those three perspectives, we would expect to see the site. So we look at the site before and after, and we can identify the site of the strike. So the cloud gives us both indications. Now it has become important to know what munition they were using, and whether there is also information about that in the image. You could see that just like the rubber coated steel bullet, we could freeze the bomb on it, and now we calculate how far the bombs from the camera. So we built again this kind of perspectival way, and we find the two craters now, and we know how far we are from the camera itself, how far the impact is. And we'll try to establish what munition it is. So here you would see them again falling. You would freeze it. You see two, but this is the interlace of the camera. So this is one bomb, and that's the second bomb. And now what we would do, we'd locate that in, so hard to see. We'd basically locate it in the model so we can measure the distance of what we see. This is 150 meters, is roughly the size of what we see, and then we catch them in the kind of the spider web, and we see each bomb exactly what dimension it is, and then we go through the manual and see that this is a 1-ton bomb. Okay, so 1-ton bomb is a kind of a bomb that was a lot of jurisprudence on, and even the title of the UN report was "You don't throw a 1-ton bomb in a neighborhood." So how do you continue? So we know that. Now we see that same cloud again on another camera that has metadata on. How do we know it's the same cloud? Because we can see the form, we can turn it around, and we can see that. We corroborate it again, and we can see that it says 11 o'clock. So that is it's very close to what we've established, 1053. So resolution of 7 minutes is something that we would accept in our that. But we know that the metadata is almost correct here. And then we can follow that guy, that camera, wherever he was in Gaza during the war is correct. Okay, so what does the IDF has to bomb in that place at 7:33 in the morning when there was a ceasefire? Okay, so that is one thing. Now you have effectively now we need to turn from the sky to the ground, and then I'll show you need to turn it around and to move to the subsoil, because the story is the tunnels. So you have like 3 domains in there. We have a friend in NASA, as any one of you I'm sure has. We all need our friend in NASA. Actually I did with him a study on something else, on the Negev, on displacement of Bedouins in the Negev, and he has developed a kind of a system of looking at agricultural sensors to establish causes of violence. So that's called NDVI. And basically what it does is that when a plant dies, it stops emitting various kind of wavelength, and it's not seen optically. Let's say there's a green grass and a tank goes over it, it would still be green, but it's no longer photosynthesizing or carbon sequestering and all that. So it would show here in that picture as green. So what you see here are the Israeli settlements. This is the Gaza border. This is the Israeli side. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 kibbutzim. This is the wall, and this is the density of Gaza. Now, the tanks would have to go through agricultural area on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side. So on the Israeli side, you see them rather careful going between the fields. When they go into Gaza, you see exactly how far they went. So for the first time, we can see every tank, how far it has been by simple kind of appropriation of an agricultural sensor. But something that is very clear that you see is that the Israeli tanks are coming from the settlements. Like, look, they're coming from here and from here and from here. So when Israel is talking about human shielding, this is something that just becomes very clear counter-narrative of that. You see, like here they are this, and then they enter into Gaza. This is a bit of a close-up where you can see it happening. You see on top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tanks. They do not go over the roads because they expect them to be booby-trapped. They go over the field and they just register, they just draw their pathway on it. Immediately it becomes visible. So this is our idea, to break the monopoly of vision of militaries over the battlefield, and somehow by subverting and reappropriating agriculture and military technology too. A lot of what we do, I'm sure the military would like to also to be able to do, if they don't do already, much better. But the question is how, in which political context you use that kind of presentation. So now we need to move, we did a little bit of the ground. I will not show you more. I know that I need to finish. Now what we're trying to show is, and here we enter into the most complex and problematic part of the investigation, the tunnels. Now the tunnels are a kind of a military defensive resource, and also economical for Palestinians. The last thing we want to show is where the tunnels are, even if we would know it, and even if we can know it. And in some places, we could know it more than what we wanted to know. But what our attempt now in the next sequence is to show where the Israelis thought the tunnels were, right? And then we're going to compare that with where the Israelis threw 1-ton bomb. Now remember, their soldier was taken into the tunnel. Now they're saying we're trying to save that soldier. And I will show you how you save a soldier with 1-ton bombs. So here is the, this is, the IDF released that map of a place where they said the firefight happened. This is this tower here, which is this tower. The firefight happened, the Palestinians were waiting up here. There's the tunnel is here on the ground level. This is the tunnel, this is that place on, here is the building, a day before. This is the day before. This is the day before. This is during. So this is like 3 hours after the capture of the soldier. And this is 14 days later. So I mean, basically everything around it has been completely demolished. Now we try to corroborate whether there is a tunnel there. We zoom into it and we can see, yes, there is the rabbit hole in there. I mean, again, unfortunately the projector quality, I'm happy to show it to anyone on my laptop. You would see it clear. Then we're looking online to see where Palestinians have taken photographs of digging. Those digging show us one thing. It shows where the IDF thought, where the IDF was thinking they can find the tunnels. So they're looking here. You see here all this digging from bulldozers. This is that. This is hiding on the way, but you see here a fence, and in between you have some digging. So we can connect the first 2 points, and this is the place that they knew it was captured, and this is a place where they dug. Okay, so we know that this is what they know that the tunnels is. Now, when the capture happened, the best friend of Lieutenant Goldin, that is the soldier that was captured and taken into the tunnel, leads a chase in the tunnel. He goes for half an hour into the tunnel. Now he gets the medal. He gets the highest medal in this war. In fact, one of the only medals that Israeli soldiers got during this war, he got. And in the medal description, you can read something about the architecture of the tunnel, because they say, I ran forward, I arrived at a T-junction. So he says, I arrived at a T-junction after X meters, and I found AK-47, and I found Goldin's equipment inside the tunnel. And then he continues to the left, etc., etc. Okay, so this is another source that is IDF source. It's not a Palestinian source, so we can use anything that came from Palestinian. We did not use in this reconstruction at all. And then we try to see where it leads to. So we're going to the areas to the north, and we see this is a Hamas military base. We're looking at during the war. We see tanks next to it on this famous satellite image that I showed you before. This is after, and you start seeing deep excavation. You see this excavation, and you start seeing craters all around this excavation. You see other excavations, and here other fence with hiding something. This is the fence. This is a place within it. So this is another place where the IDF think there is a tunnel. These are, and then we go on finding more and more points where they were digging, where we can see digging after the war. We locate them on the map. We place them on it, areas in between where they were digging. So then we know that they were digging in these locations. And so, you know, there's various multiple pathways that they could have imagined. But you see, for example, this part is where we saw the 1-ton bombs being dropped. And this is the area after it. It is actually here on a straight line with the other tunnel areas. So these are the areas that were actually bombed most severely during that war. So, okay, there is more to say, but in fact what you can see that the process here of the day in which most Palestinians died, in which the 108 Palestinians died in this one cycle, 8 to 8 in the morning, mainly civilian Palestinian families, etc. What drives that day is a kind of a manhunt after that soldier in a kind of an invisible architecture of the tunnels that we don't know, we don't want to know, but we want to understand and establish the kind of the intention of Israel to kill one of their own soldier. Do I have another case study, or should I stop?
Yeah, maybe we should stop.
All right, thank you.
Is this the soldier that they reported was killed initially?
I mean, the story is so much more complex and involves also what I think is, because Israel right now accepts that they couldn't find him because the tunnel that he was in collapsed. And also Hamas says it. So Hamas and Israel agree there's no body anymore. The body is gone. I think that at that moment, a kind of a different story started emerging, and that is that the soldier died before he was killed by Israelis, right? So you cannot kill a dead man. So the idea was the soldier that ran after him retrieved some pieces of clothing from the tunnel. These clothing were taken to Tel Aviv to the medical forensic unit, who gave initial an assessment that, so the initial kind of press on it was that he could not have survived and there would not have been a Hamas doctor able to save him after that quantity of blood loss from vital internal organs. The chief rabbi for the first time gave not a missing in action nor a dead whose place of burial is unknown, which are two categories that you can give without a body, but to say we have the body is the DNA. And the next day a funeral was arranged in which they buried those few drops of blood that they had on the clothing. And the idea, I think, is that the medical theological debate and confirmation and the death certificate was the continuation of the Hannibal. So the Hannibal, of course, you need to take away the card from Hamas. So you need to kill him, but it's not enough to kill. You need also to legally kill. You need to have the medical record. So I do not know. We've sent some queries. There is not. The medical report would not be released. I've asked medical doctors, and in fact, I want to ask you whether it is possible to say with certainty, based on blood, that the person is not alive. Because I think he was the firefighter. I assume he was wounded, or at least hit during the capture. The question is, and it's a relevant question, was he alive between 9:06 when the capture took place and 10:53 when the 1-ton bomb hit the ground? Could he have survived this time? If he could have, it's a very different, I know it's picking now needles, it's maybe irrelevant in the large scheme of things, but that means they could have killed him. If he was dead and they have the body and they made a funeral, it's something very different, right? So, and I think all those things are politicized, theology and forensics. It's part of the forensic warfare, in fact, of that aspect of that conflict. So this is, that day happened in the medical forensic unit, in a chief rabbi, military rabbi, and on the field, and with the civilians of Rafah, and with those, somehow you need to understand all those elements to understand what has happened here. And I find it rather incredible that Palestinians would take that line and support it, absolutely, because I think that there is something that is in this particular day that is very different than all those carnage that we see. Of course, what matters here at the end of that day, when the sun set over that day, is how many Palestinian civilians died. But what drove it was something scary and somehow new, because those debates about what to do with prisoners and captures are debates that many countries are now undertaking. No, what to do? I mean, how much to pay? Should we pay? Should we not pay? Is it better not to deal with them and let them assassinate, murder So I think on that scale of debate, Israel is somehow, and to say something nice for once, no, it's on both sides of that scale. No, I mean it's the place that would pay most for a captured soldier, for a prisoner, and they're the place that would kill him, and they would kill because they would pay most. And somehow it's an internal discussion. It's also a discussion between the kind of liberal, center left, whatever it means, in Israel, that and the National Religious Unit. That unit that was involved in that is a unit of settlers and national religious soldiers that wanted to show a kind of a level of resolve that perhaps in other sector of the army they would not show, i.e. that the friend of Lieutenant, his best friend, the moment after he was captured, would chase him, would go into the tunnel and would shoot straight, continuously, knowing that he may kill Goldin, and later been interviewed on that and saying, yes, I knew, I understood it, but it would be better to kill him than to have him being taken prisoner and to get a medal for it, right? Is a shift. You know, you can examine through it also changes within Israeli society itself. Uh-oh.
There are two dimensions in your work, and you really insisted on it.
4. With time.
Well, two set of two dimensions. And you insisted very much, and very beautifully, on the bringing, on the architecture of what is brought to the fore. But except in the last moment of your answer, you didn't expand very much on this other part, which is the very architecture of the form, or the form, the architecture of the very form. Because what we've had is the detective part of it, right? So we have something like a Columbo meets Mission Impossible, right? The Columbo part is, here I am, small architect, my wife happens to work on Ruskin, so I know about the clouds and all that. And so, despite the lack of means, you manage to uncover the plot. So, and the Mission Impossible is, of course, the image complex and this technology that is so profuse that everybody's lost at the end and say, oh, this guy really knows something, because there are so many elements that are put together and come together. So, that's amazing, but it also, in a way, envelops the idea that we are in a classic detective story, where there is the lawyer or the detective doing the inquiry, and even though the criminal is well protected by the state, there will be some kind of an incorruptible judge who will adjudicate and save the day. The problem is there such a judge, and where will it be? Right? And that enters a different aspect, which is the aspect of the architecture of the form itself. Because what you've also showed implicitly is the answer that you can get to your inquiry. First answer, which looks very much like Freud's famous joke about the cauldron. You know, I didn't borrow the cauldron, it was already damaged when you gave it to me, and it was in perfect shape when I gave it back to you. So there you have that in the experts saying, no, we didn't do it. Anyway, you cannot prove that we did it. Anyway, we had the right to do it. Right? So the three possible dimensions. And then, which leads to that. If they say, well, we had the right to do it. You know, I mean, Palestinians who die, usually they're human shields that are used by the Palestinians in order to discredit Israel. So there you have to deal also with the choice of your battles. Because the choice of your battles, you have to find some kind of a story where it will be harder for them to just dismiss it on the basis that we don't care, we have the right to do what we do. Right? Because you have the possibility of appropriation. Your first case, the case of the changing of the trajectory of the wall, they've appropriated it. It's a way of looking relatively good. Right? Yes, you want something by changing the trajectory of the wall, but they also can show that, see, we're human, we're humane, and we're trying to do the best we can under a difficult situation. In the second case, it's in a way even worse, because the fact that you arrest a soldier shows, you know, how attached you are to human rights. But in the third case, then it becomes more problematic, because despite what you just said at the very end now about the national religious ethics, nonetheless, the idea for the Israeli army that they would hunt their own men and kill them, when usually their big sense of moral superiority is the fact that they are ready to swap one soldier for 2,000 prisoners, that becomes more problematic. So there's also, in a way, a choice of battles that enters into the entire forensic.
Yeah, you know, we were looking, there is no law, because nobody imagined a situation like that. So you know, you can, you know, when in international lawyers in Amnesty were trying to look for the clause that would not allow the army to hunt their own men, and it doesn't exist. All the kind of the prisoner laws are about prisoners you take. So it operates outside of IHL, that case. And this is also its power. Now, you know, if I would show the third case, again, it's a case on environmental law, environmental damage. It's a story that goes from the First World War to the present. It's a very slow story. It's very slow violence, and it kind of moves also from court to another alternative kind of forum. But I would say in generally that the way we tend to think of ourselves is primarily as historians. This is history of architecture. And history of architecture is too long been the history of architects, right? If you go to study history of architecture, you study the letters of architects and the drawings, etc. So it's a historical method, primarily. Then we try to do stuff with it. And we go somewhere and we get hit, and we go another, and we try here and we try there, and this is it's never easy, because you're in a field of politics, and when you're in a field of politics, you are maneuvering between imperfect set of patterns and effects. So initially, I would ask anyone that has a problem with that thing: do you have a problem with history? Do you think we should know what happened during that day or not? And I think history operates on various registers, out and in court, etc. Of course, the case accelerates the production of history, and our attempt, the forensics, is an attempt to act with it and to connect it to other action. As I say, you know, even if we are thrown out of the ICC, even if the ICC is the most horrible racist court in the world, Israel sees it as a great danger. Israel sees it now as the biggest, or what they call the third strategic threat to them: delegitimacy, boycott, etc. Those things also need pegs to hang on. Facts, even what we produce, is kind of like speculative to a certain extent. A lot of what we do would be dismissed from court because it's not, you know, the kind of solid evidence, and we are not a solid expert to do it. But what they need political help, and they allow for forums to assemble around the evidence. So the opposite, the kind of criminal court has the forum already there, and has the protocol, and you go and perform in it. When you operate outside of very clear legal framework, the evidence comes before the forum. The forum comes or you try to assemble political action, i.e. a forum around the evidence itself. And I think this is really the difference. What is forensics, where there is no law, where there is no clear framework. Sorry.
I was wondering how far do you guys knew about the, let's say, Hannibal strategy? Has there been a debate about it? Because this is not really in line with the official position of the. I mean, how old is this strategy? Something new? Has it been an object of a debate? And my other question is about the notion of human shields. I mean, you have a very convincing point, make a very convincing point about the human shields when you trace the way the tanks move from Israel to Gaza. And the human shield is a very symbolic, a very strong issue when it comes to this conflict, and the idea that Israel has an army which protects its population, whereas Hamas has a population which protects its army. So that's the motto we hear all the time. So this point, which is a kind of collateral point in your demonstration, would be, I think, quite interesting to put before the court or something.
Yeah. So very technically, Hannibal is first drafted in '86, and it really marked the shift of from symmetrical war so the 82 is the last war with the army that Israel has, or if you discount the bombing of Syrian army now. But armor to armor is 73, 82. And then Israel enters into kind of asymmetrical warfare. It does not recognize prisoners. It does not give POW right to them. It arrested them initially as criminals and now as kind of illegal. In fact, the very category of unlawful combatant comes from a kind of a processing of an Israeli formulation that emerges at that time. And then at the same time, Hannibal comes. When you cannot enter into an economy, when there is no reciprocity, when there is no recognition, capture and exchange. So for the Palestinian groups, initially it was PFLP that was very much involved in attempt to capture soldiers and to release. It was forcing themselves into being recognized as a partner. You must talk to us. We exist, right? Because we hold your own people. And establishing a certain kind of an economy where no rule and no law and no Geneva Convention was there to protect. Then it goes through several versions. It's kind of continuously redrafted. There's a whole history of the redrafting of that because it's exposed in the 90s a little bit. There's a little controversy. It's changed, it's softened. Then after Shalit, it's hardened. You know, so, but the fact is that never did it stop an act of capture. And I think in this war is the first time when it actually killed the soldier if he wasn't dead by that time. So that's a question, if he survived those 2 hours or not, before he was killed twice, so to say, second time. And your second question was about, yeah. I think this is, it's very obviously kind of a potent point to make. I don't know if in the law or in any other public discussion or public forum, we not just work for lawyers, but one thing I would say that what is very interesting about human shielding is that the way in which there's two categories of human shielding. There is voluntary and involuntary human shield, right? So there is an involuntary human shield is when you impose on a civilian population your presence. At least it gives it some, it's to a certain extent, it's a double victim. No, it's a victim both of the Hamas, let's say, and it's a victim. A voluntary human shield is being produced now by Israeli legal jurisprudence as a participant in battle. So if you're getting warned, for example, and you are not leaving the area that you're warned, it means that you are there to protect. If you're there to protect, you're there to impede military action. If you're there to impede military action, you're like the guy in front of the tank. A guy, unarmed person in a military conflict standing in front of a tank is by international law a legitimate target, right? So the question is, how do you shift the human shields from involuntary to voluntary through various practices of warning? So warning is basically, you get the warning, you have a choice. Either you take your life in your hand, go out and hopefully nothing happens, or you stay and then you can be killed legally. You lose your right immediately, no, as a protected party. So I think there's the whole issue of human shielding has various nuances to it, which are very interesting. When the tanks are in the kibbutzim, this is not only that something that we could see there. The news were there. The kibbutzniks were making grill, no, feeding them when they were coming out, Coca-Cola and this and that. So, of course, doesn't mean they are a legitimate target, but it's.
Yeah, just I would like you to come back on the background of all this data. How do you collect, how do you gather all this data?
We scan social media. We work with Hebrew social media sites. We look a lot of what soldiers are posting online also, you know. You don't need to only wait for breaking the silence, although we integrate their point of view into into the report, but they show off this online, and they have that, and Israeli or Hebrew readers are helping us to collect that, and Palestinians are helping us collect from Palestinian social media. And then when people know that we have it, it's just non-stop, we get more and more stuff. Because the question is like how the city senses war. When war begins, it starts sensing it in various ways. People remember, people record, the plants remember, the concrete remembers. There's various ways in which it is done, and I think right now it's becoming more and more and more continuously that the idea of collecting evidence becomes a common project for Palestinians. And that's only if you see it, if it remains in a pile of in those, you don't get, if you see the first thing, you don't know anything. What do you see? The story is in none of those images. The story is between those images, no? So.
Last question. In your book, you talk about one of Human Rights Watch experts who provided kind of forensic evidence about the Cascade operation, and concluded that to conduct such human rights work, you need to be the criminal. Only the criminal can solve the crime.
Yeah.
Exactly. Former Palestinian officer with passion for Nazi.
Yeah. So we share the passion. Yeah.
It's just my question. And then considering do you mean that you have to have more IDF experts within your team? Do you rely more on former IDF soldiers, or
okay.
yourself are becoming? I mean, in terms of criminal minds?
No, I really like Garlasco, and I asked him to, in fact, to participate in this investigation. I mean, I should show you the emails that he sent me, so I take the camera off, and, he was going like, if I were to bomb that building, I would have run it. But he is just the best in understanding that, and the most borderline figure that you can imagine. And maybe this is my political kind of sense as well. You need to get in there. You need to get as close as possible, but not closer, to power and complicity in order to get politics done. This is one of my guiding lights, principles, To get as close as possible, but not closer. Now, how to measure this? I don't know if I know how to measure it properly, but I constantly think about it. And maybe I crossed it already. Maybe I'm already on the dark side. I don't know. But I have to say, it's not for me to, the kind of position of safety in traditional lefty critique is not my composition, I don't know, psychological composition. This is not for me.
Wow, it's a brilliant conclusion.